What's up, guys? Let's take a look at another CodeWars exercise. This one's called A Brave New Wordle. It follows the rules of the game Wordle, which I've just demonstrated here. We've got a 5-letter word we're trying to guess, and we input 5-letter words comparing each slot to see gray or black means nothing. There's no match at all. Yellow means that letter is in there, but not at that spot, and we don't know how many times. And then green means there is a T and it's right there, but we still don't know if there are others. That's not included. So my second guess had another A, still not at that spot, but it's still somewhere. And then my third had an N, not at that spot, but we're getting a lot of info. Usually you can nail it on your fourth or fifth because you've eliminated a bunch of letters that aren't in there, and you got some info about the ones that are, even if you're not sure where. So the answer was faint, and what this is going to ask us to do is one round of, they call it black for the miss, yellow or green. So let's look right here. If I said splat and it was faint, it would go S, not at that spot, not at all. P, not at that spot, not at all. L, same thing. A, not at that spot, but it's in there. And then T, yes at that spot, so we're good. Now, this seems easy, but there are a few tricky layers to it. Probably it's harder to make than to play, and let's get into it. I've got right here a naive first try piece of code that does half the job, and I wanted to start from there and show you how it goes wrong. So this says, hey, we're going to zip the guess and the solution, line them up so we can look at the first of each, the second of each, and so on. And then if they're exact, we give it a G. If it's in there, we give it a Y. And otherwise we put a B, and then we return those letters joined up. Like I said, this passes half the tests because that is the logic, but we have way too many Y's. That's the issue. Maybe multiple things causing it, but we have way too many Y's, okay? So this is, for example, if we have 5 A's and it was 3 A's and 2 B's, we're giving too many Y's, basically. So if I've said this fourth A, then I've already hit my quota of A's. Any further should be black, because I've already given the A's 3 greens. And if I give them Y's, it kind of misleads the player into thinking there are more A's than there really are. If I've given 3 greens, 2 A's, and there are 3 A's in the answer, we're done. They get downgraded to black. Okay? Now, there's another way of getting too many Y's, but we'll handle this one first, and then we'll see the final little wrinkle in the solution. So let's say, okay, how can I handle that? I probably want to keep a count. I want to say, hey, there are 3 A's. So if I dole out 3 hits, meaning green or yellow, can't do any more for A's. So I'm going to import Python's counter, which I've used recently. I use all the time. It does exactly what we need here. Great. I'm going to say counter equals uppercase counter of solution. So this says, like, okay, we've got, you know, A2 would be 3. And then when we're going through this, we can just tick it down a little bit and say, hey, if I ever hit an A, if I give it a green or a yellow, I'm going to cash in one of those counts, and then I won't accidentally give it too many by the end of the word. So we could say, I was going to say maybe in these, but we really do it no matter what, so I could just put it once at the end. Something like this. I can say counter of G minus equal 1, and let's run that real quick just to make sure. I just typed a few lines. I may have a syntax error or something. It won't be a different result because I haven't actually used this info yet. Okay, so now let's use it. And remember, the problem was too many Y's. Everything else is fine. So we're going to change something on the Y's, and we're going to say if G is in there and counter G is greater than 0, then we won't do too many. Let's try that. Oh my gosh, we handled that one. We handled a few similar ones, but we're not quite perfect. And that's, well, let's take a look. If I guess wooer, which has 2 O's, and it was really ivory, then I've got to make sure my first O gets nothing. So if I say, hey, that's a Y on the first O, and then I hit the second O, and it's a green, because it's perfect, then I mislead the player into thinking there's another O somewhere. Because they see, oh, O got a green, and then they go, oh, O got a yellow, does that mean there's another O? I gotta make sure that there's one in the answer, and there's one that gets a non-black hit, you know? And the problem is I can't really do that with my current setup because I have to look into the future. I have to say, okay, if it's in there and our counter would be something if we went further, and I don't want to do a loop inside of a loop to look forward every time because that might be a mess. It might work, but I'm not going to do it. So instead, we're going to have to separate the greens, done. Then we do the rest, okay? And this is a pretty normal thing. Whenever you're reading code or reading text, you might have to look through the whole thing before you understand any of it. When Python is reading my code, it has to look through the whole thing at least once before it can start running. So the most obvious example would be, what if there's a syntax error at the very end? Well, it's not going to start a function and start a list and make a counter and do all this only to crash there. It's going to say, hey, we can't even start. Like if I hit test right now, hey, we have a syntax error. Okay, so Python does not just start at the top and go down. It looks one pass through the whole thing, probably more than one, right? To make sure all the names point to the right things and make sure that all the lists have enough memory and all of that kind of thing. So that works in English too. I sometimes will hear a sentence and not really know what it means until I hit the end, because maybe there's a negative that flips it all if somebody says not, or maybe there's like a quote like he said at the end, which means, oh, that wasn't you saying it, that was you quoting somebody else. Or maybe there's just a mistake at the end that makes the whole thing nonsensical. So we're going to have to do that with our Wordle. We'll have to look through once and do the greens, and then start back at the beginning in a separate loop to do the rest, or really just the yellows. So let's do that. I can't use this empty list and append because I'm not going to be sticking in order. I might like put a green in the 5th slot before I've done anything else. So instead I'm going to say, okay, this will just be like 5 blanks. So that's going to be a list of 5 blanks. Let's print it just to show you what I mean. Yeah, we got 5 blanks, and then it doesn't end up changing anything when we join. The blanks go away. But I'm not going to append. Instead, I'm going to say the thing I usually try to avoid is using indexing. I usually try to avoid it because it's prettier to do things like zip. But in this case, I can't zip the result with the guess and solution. You can zip 3 things, but you can't mutate it through that. You have to use the index to reach in and fiddle with the contents. So, okay, fine. I'll use I to hit that index, and that means I'll have to get the I with another great function, a cousin of zip, is enumerate. So let's do both. Let's say enumerate and zip. And so this will keep these 2 because we're going to need it at least on the first loop, and put an I in there as well. And I think we need parentheses. Let me try that, see how it goes. I know it's not done yet, but I want to see if I have any mistakes. No, okay, so this is still kind of doing the job, not using the new thing we've added, right? So instead we want to say, hey, one pass for the greens, like that, and then do another one for the other stuff. But when I do this, I have to do this immediately. Okay, I have to say like, all right, we give you a G and then we take off, like that wooer ivory example. We'd say, okay, that middle slot gets a G, and then O is done. There was one O in the ivory solution, now it's down to 0, and now when I hit that O on wooer, I won't accidentally give it a yellow. So now I can say, all right, I'm just going to do this again, probably. And I'll make a comment. Okay, first pass green, second pass yellow, and then the B's, maybe we'll do it in here, or maybe we'll throw them in at the end, because it'll be obvious where the B's go. It's just whatever's still empty, you know? So we'll say IGS and this thing. Maybe we don't need the zip anymore, but I'll keep it. And then we say, okay, if, let's simplify. Okay, if G is in solution, maybe we don't need that. If we've got the counter, we'll see what happens. And counter is greater than 0. Maybe we don't need that. Maybe we could just say counter G, because 0 is false. But I'm worried, what if we get negatives, you know? And there's nothing in the current slot for the results. So if I ran this, I think it would find like the greens and then put Y's on top of them. Let's run it to see if that's true, but I think that's what would happen. Oh, and this is bad because we haven't done the B's at all. Okay. What I was thinking for the B's is to just throw them in at the last second. So I could say like R or B for R in result. So like for each thing in the result, if it's something, we use it. If not, we throw in a B. Okay, so yeah, this one is good. I don't need that anymore. This one is good, except that I'm taking a green and writing a yellow on top of it. I think that's what's happening. So if I guess reads and it was sales, then I'm saying like, hey, that last S, that's a green, but I accidentally put a Y on top because this triggers, you know, so I need to say something like, and by the way, I hate stacking all these conditions. If this, and this, and this, surely we can simplify. And result I is not blank, right? No, or if it is blank, because that's the ones we want to fill in, right? Okay, so that's passing. I could probably pass the whole thing if I hit attempt, but I want to simplify this because, like I said, there's no way we need all of that. Okay, so let's see here. I think what I want to do is cut that entirely, because G in solution is the same thing as have we counted any, right? Like I don't need to look through the word. The counters already look through the word, and the counter's even better because it's taken down a few notches of greens. So I think we can cut that whole chunk. Beautiful. And like I said, I'm pretty sure we don't need this because numbers are true and 0 is false, and I don't think it ever goes negative because we're carefully going through. We're not just like subtracting willy-nilly. Let's try that. Okay, and then for this one, I feel like I want to say not, because a blank is false, and we could just say not, which to me feels cleaner than equals a specific value. I know it doesn't matter, but I just like having English words like and not instead of equals and quotes and all of this stuff that looks a little too codey. So, alright, that's pretty cool. I think I could probably trim this down as well. I don't think we need the zip as much on the second round, but I do like the parallel nature, having them both the same. Now I'm going to hit attempt, and hey, that's great. Let's look at the solutions from other people when it comes to, oh, look at that. Here's somebody who did same thing we did. They zipped, and then they probably realized later to enumerate. And in fact, this is almost exactly the same as what I wrote. And when I saw this earlier today, I gave this a little upvote, and I hope you will as well. Let's scroll through the others real quick and see if there are any that differ. They're using counter, they're using the range len to get the index, which is exactly the same as enumerating, but maybe a tiny bit less typing, I think, just because enumerate's a long word. And they do 2 passes to catch the greens first, because you have to look into the future on those. And then they put B and Y in there at the same time on the second pass. Very reasonable. As you can see, whenever we go through and we're like, oh yeah, I'm thinking of all this, we're not special. Everybody else thought of the same thing because they probably tried to loop once, give the 3 colors, then they realized I'm doing too many yellows, then they realized we have to look backwards, then they realized we have to look forwards. I'm guessing my thoughts are pretty much the same as what these people have, or pretty much the same as if you were asking ChatGPT to do it. You'd have to say, wait, fix this, wait, fix this, and it would go through the same stuff in likely the same order. So, well, there's one that, you know, broke it up into more lines, but it still looks like the same thing. And it, yep. I'm a little disappointed to not see any hugely different ones. I'd love to keep scrolling. Hey, there's me. I'd love to keep scrolling until we find a really wildly unique approach, but that might not happen. So I like this one because anytime you have a problem that is based on a real thing, I've played Wordle, I know how it works, but it's trickier than you assumed, that's always when you end up learning something. Thanks.